This is a 1936 Ford four-door sedan. I came to acquire the car thanks to a good friend, Rob Swartz, at Rob's Dyno Service. He discovered the car, told me the story, and quite frankly, I couldn't say no. 1936 was a pretty interesting year for Ford. There were a lot of lasts that occurred that year, one being the last for a mechanical braking system. It's not hydraulic, it's fully mechanical and has a whole series of levers and cams throughout the entire underside of the car. It was also the last year of the split hood, the last year of pedestal mount headlights, and that was pretty innovative. And quite frankly, I've always been intrigued by Mr. Henry Ford. He wasn't as much of an automotive innovator as he was a process innovator. The first flathead V8 was put in a Ford vehicle in 1932, but it was not the first V8. In fact, Henry Ford produced V8s for his Lincoln automobiles for 10 years prior to that. What made them so unique was that Mr. Ford devised a process to cast a V8 block into one piece, and historically they had always been multiple pieces bolted together to form the block. So Mr. Ford was a genius at being able to make nice cars affordable for the common man in the Depression era. Now, the story of this car, it only changed hands a couple of times during its entire lifespan. It is in fact original from bumper to bumper. The only thing that's not original are the red wheels, which I painted because it makes it go faster. This is lacquer, 84-year-old lacquer. Now, a unique thing about lacquer, which you'll learn more about here shortly in the video, is there's no clear coat. So the paint survived for 84 years, but despite that fact, it was in very, very rough shape. So when I found out this car was an all-original car at that age, my goal was to preserve it. Not to restore it, not to resto-mod it, but to preserve the car for exactly what it was. The biggest challenge of that was actually the paint. So in today's video, we're going to do it in 3 different stages featuring Wizards products. This is not a paid advertisement. In the first stage, I'm going to show you how I completely restored the paint on this car and applied a ceramic coat. The next 2 stages of this video, we're going to go back to the shop and I'll show you on a Harley-Davidson gas tank how we can use the exact same process on modern base coat clear coat paints to do paint correction, and also how to do a scratch repair. And yes, I'm going to take a key, put about a 2-inch deep scratch into the paint and show you how that can be repaired. To fully appreciate the benefits of Wizards products when comparing to others, I feel like I need to give you a bit of a history on automotive paints and the progression of technology over the years. I've been involved in auto restoration and motorcycles for 40 years and have seen a bunch of changes during that time. The terminology for automotive paints has been driven by the progression of technologies and by the desire to both distinguish new technologies and relate to previous technologies for the same purpose. Modern car paints are nearly always an acrylic polyurethane enamel with a pigmented base coat and a clear top coat. There are also other stages or enhancements, of course, like candies, pearls, and metal flake. But for the most part, modern auto paint is described as acrylic enamel, urethane, etc. And the clear coat, in particular, may be described as a lacquer. But true lacquers and acrylic lacquers are obsolete, and plain acrylic enamels have largely been superseded. True enamels, like alkyd enamels, are not an automotive paint. They use that on stuff like equipment and industrial applications. The term is common for any tough, glossy paint, but its use in the automotive industry is often restricted to older paints before the introduction of polyurethane hardeners. Now, in the early days of the automobile industry, lacquer paint was applied manually and dried for weeks at room temperature because it was a single component paint that dried by solvent evaporation. As mass production of cars made the process untenable, paint began to be dried in ovens. It was such a slow process that Henry Ford's most common color used was black, because black dried much faster. This is why most Model Ts and As were black, and also why cars of other colors back then cost so much more. The more cars that were built, lacquer paint then became an environmental issue. Up to about 85% of lacquer paint can evaporate into the air. Enamel paint is better for the environment and replaced lacquer paint in the late 20th century. Water-based acrylic polyurethane enamels are now almost universally used as the base coat with a clear coat. One of the biggest challenges with lacquer paint is the fact that there is no clear coat, so there's no protection from the elements. And when you have an 84-year-old weathered original lacquer and a desire to keep the car as original as possible to preserve it, what you use on it to restore it matters. So if you've watched enough of our channel, you know the deal. I only want to bring products to you guys that work, that it's a good value, and it does what the manufacturer claims that it does. This is not a paid advertisement. I purchased all of these products to do the restoration on this 1936 Ford with, again, all original 84-year-old lacquer. Okay, I also like to purchase kits when it's possible because manufacturers put an enormous amount of R&D into their product line. And when they assemble kits, it's always typically a better value. You do save some money, but you're pretty much guaranteed success as long as you use all of their products as put into the kit in the manner in which they tell you to use it. So, everything that you see on the table is what I used for the car. So we start with the Big Throw buffer. Now this is a dual action buffer, the 21 HD. It's a dual action buffer. I like dual action buffers rather than your just standard orbital buffers because they are more forgiving. They're easier to use. They tend to follow curves on surfaces much easier, and it's a bit easier just to maintain control of the buffer with a DA. So with the buffer and scratch and swirl remover kit, you get the buffer, you get a bottle of Mystic Cut compound, you get a bottle of the Mystic Nano Wax, and these three pads. Now, these three pads, really, believe it or not, are kind of the science behind this system, and I'll get into why here shortly. Now, the kit does not come with a 32-ounce bottle. I purchased the 32-ounce bottle because I figured it would be the amount that I would need to buff this car as bad as the paint was. But to my surprise, after buffing this car 4 times, I've only used about half of the bottle. Okay, so I gave you all the information on history of paint because of what I've had to go through over the past 40 years of doing this type of thing to cars and bikes. And what I found was I had to have a myriad of different products based on the type of paint that I was restoring. Not only that, I had to have the knowledge and experience of how those different products would react to that type of paint to be able to use them successfully. Quite often those products, you have to buy them in large quantities, and they're also incredibly expensive. The other side of that, many of those products, you have to use one specific type of pad for one specific type of compound. And then when you go to the next step, you have to change pads, change compounds, and then you have to remember what you used, and you have to keep track of all of that stuff for every typical type of paint that's out there. It can be very difficult to use. So when I reached out to Wizards and inquired about this car, I wanted a product and a system that I could use universally over every type of paint and with pretty much the exact same process, yet still get the exact same results. And I'm excited to say we've done that. So again, in the video after this portion, I'm going to show you how to use all of these products on the fender of the car. Now, I have done the entire car, ceramic coated and everything, except for the passenger side front fender because it's similar to the shape of a motorcycle gas tank. So I'm going to show you how to use each one of the products on the fender and show you the results there. And of course, there's going to be some before and after pictures that I'm going to show along the way while I'm showing you that, so you'll see what we started with and what we ended with. Okay, now because lacquer is that single stage paint, there is no clear coat. There is nothing to protect it from the elements. In fact, when I finished buffing this car, I washed it with the sole purpose of cleaning the surface so that I could then apply the ceramic coat kit. Within minutes, it water spotted. So I had to go back and rebuff the entire car again to remove all the water spots. I didn't realize that lacquer would water spot that fast. So we have the buffer along with the scratch and swirl remover kit, which are available on our website. Then I also have the ceramic coat kit. Now in the kit you get several microfibers, you get some gloves, you get these great little hand applicators, put the product on, then you get a pre-coat cleaner, then you get a ceramic boost, which I'll go through what each one of these are for when we're doing the application, and then of course you get the bottle of ceramic. Now when you open the package, do not be surprised at how small of an amount of product you get. This goes a very long way. In fact, I put 2 thin coats on the car and only used about half the bottle. So this does go a long way. You weren't shorted by getting a small bottle of the stuff, I can assure you. And over time, after I see how it reacts, I will probably go back and do another coat or two. I primarily wanted to put a thin coat on it, just again to see the quality of the product and how it would react over time. So I'm glad I had enough of that left over. So again, you can purchase all of this stuff on our website under the accessories section, and you'll see car care products. And now let's jump on that fender. I'm going to show you how to use all this stuff. The first thing you'd want to do is wash the surface. You can use the Mystic Wash as a great product. This car, it's already clean. I've already washed it, but we are going to start with removing some impurities out of the paint. And the way we do that, let's do a light spray of Mist and Shine just to get the surface clean. Then I want to go back, wet the surface with the Mist and Shine, and then use a clay bar with very light pressure. The idea with a clay bar, all we're doing is just removing any particulate contaminants from the paint just to get a nice smooth surface there. A lot of times this is where your swirl marks come from. People will miss this step here, and all the impurities that were in the paint then get basically absorbed or catch themselves inside the buffer. And when that happens, you end up with a lot of cobwebbing and swirl marks everywhere. So after you do that, you should have a nice smooth, clean surface. We have to remember what we're doing when we're buffing paint. We're actually removing a very small amount of the paint. The trick to it is to remove as little clear coat or paint as possible in order to get the surrounding surface around the scratches level. And that's typically how it works. Now, I'd mentioned one of the tricks to the Wizard system was the fact that they used the same Mystic Cut compound for the 2 pads for the correction process. They are the same product, but they use 2 different pads. That makes it easy to keep up with everything. So shake the product really well, and I just apply 4 small dots, 4 pea-sized small dots, and that's all you need for an area of about 1.5 feet by 2 feet, give or take. And I'll dot the surface just to spread it out. I set the buffer on 4 and using very, very light pressure. Again, you don't want to press down into the paint. We want to just use the weight of the buffer across the paint, move about 1 inch per second, and give the product time to work. Now, one big thing to notice is that we didn't sling product everywhere across the entire car. A lot of other products out there, you have to use so much of the compound that it just absolutely slings everywhere, and in a lot of cases you'll end up needing to mask off certain parts of the car with plastic or paper to keep from it getting everywhere, and you can see we haven't done that. Now, with just a couple of quick applications, I've already removed a considerable amount of the cobwebbing. Okay, now I have just these tiny scratches. Now, if you take your fingernail, that's kind of a good trick, especially if you're working with a clear coat. Okay, if you take your fingernail and wipe it across the scratch, if you can't really feel the scratch with your fingernail, then you know more than likely you'll be able to get that scratch out. If you can catch it with your fingernail and it feels pretty deep and you're working with a clear coat, another way you can do it is wet your finger, wet a towel, and wipe it across the scratch. If the scratch vanishes, then you know pretty much that you're still in clear, that you're not actually into the color. Now, if you wipe that scratch and it's wet and you still see straight through the scratch, then more than likely you're not going to be able to get that scratch out. You can make it better, but it won't go away because it's actually through the color, more than likely into the primer or the metal underneath. Now with this one, remember, this is a lacquer. This is not a base coat, clear coat. So this is solid color all the way through. So if I wet it, the scratch vanishes. That tells me I'm not through the lacquer. So I'm going to continue buffing on this area to see if I can remove a few more of these scratches on the fender. Perfect. Now that I've got most of the scratches removed, I'm going to move on to the second step. There's a couple other points that I want to make on this. One of the biggest things you'll notice, even though again this is 84-year-old paint, I'm removing a good bit of material, you don't see the material clogging up the pad. With a lot of other products that I've used, they're so aggressive, so abrasive, and not really that user-friendly. It's very easy for you to just chew into the paint and your pads start clogging up quickly, causing you to have to constantly clean the pad. It's also a sign that the product is very aggressive, probably more aggressive than you would need. Notice we don't have that here. Okay, now I have used this pad to do this entire car and only cleaned it once, and you see it's not clogged up. After a little bit of time, if the pad does get clogged up, you can take a soft bristle nylon brush like this and just brush through the pad, and that'll remove a lot of the dust and any of the contaminants or anything like that. The biggest thing is just to make sure that this pad doesn't touch the ground. You want to make sure this stays very, very clean during the process, and you won't have any cobwebbing or scratches when you're done. Now we'll move to the orange foam pad. Use the exact same amount of product, the exact same process. 4 pea-sized dots over the same area. Okay, so one question might be, how do you know you're using the right amount of product? Well, fact is, again, we're not clogging up the pad. And when we do our initial wipe of the surface, it hazes up a little bit. When we go back across the surface, we're actually buffing that haze back off, and there's virtually no product at all left on the surface. And yet we're still removing the scratches. We know it's the right amount of pressure because we're not removing a ton of paint, yet we're still removing the scratches. So once you get a feel for it, then it's very easy just to continue the process throughout the entire car. Now, to really pull a deep luster out of the paint, that's when we move to the black pad and the Mystic Nano Wax. Now this only requires a very, very small amount of product. I put about a small piece, one single pea-sized dot, maybe a little bigger. The product's pretty thin, so it comes out quick. Rub it around a little bit, blot it across the surface in several areas. Same speed, same pressure. Now we get to the final step of applying the ceramic coat. Now, of course, you want to make sure that the surface is cool and completely dry to the touch. It's actually a good idea once you finish compounding and polishing the car to give it a really good wash, and then of course use the synthetic chamois to completely dry the car, make sure there's no water spots. Now the thing about ceramic coating, you have to be sure you are completely satisfied with the shine, the finish, and the scratch removal, and that the surface is completely clean when you go to apply it. Because once you put the ceramic coating on, you will lock in any water spots, haze, or scratch for 2 to 3 years, which is basically the life of the ceramic coating. Now, one of the components in the ceramic kit is the pre-coat cleaner. You have to be sure that the surface is completely clean. So start with a clean microfiber that comes in the kit, give a good spray on the surface, and let's wipe it down and dry it really well. Okay, now it's time to apply the ceramic. So I'll start with the mitt and apply about 10 drops to the leading edge of the mitt. And wipe the surface back and forth in a very smooth motion. Now you'll notice as you're applying it that it hazes up a little bit. The idea is to use a very gentle touch with this, and you're smoothing the product around on the surface. Once you wipe in one direction, turn 90 degrees and wipe back across the same area, side to side. Now it's a good idea to only work on one panel at a time, one door, one fender. Because when you finish that one particular area, you want to wait no more than about 3 to 4 minutes. You'll actually see the coating develop a rainbow effect. It'll haze up just a little bit. Once it does that, grab another clean microfiber from the kit. The idea here is not to remove the material, but only to smooth it out and even the coating. So we'll wipe in one direction. Do not use excessive pressure. And then back 90 degrees. Once you see that you've smoothed the haze out across the entire panel, any adjoining panels, you can rub in a circular motion like this to blend the coating together. Now, this first coat, you want to let it dry for about an hour. Then we'll come back and recoat it again. Now let's apply the second coat the exact same way we did the first one. Again, we'll wait 3 to 4 minutes, let it flash over till we see that rainbow effect, and we'll buff it clean with a microfiber. Now, one of the great things about the ceramic coating is you can use it on any surface on the car. So when you're doing your washing and your detailing, make sure you're cleaning things like your headlights and all of your chrome trim, your bumpers, your wheels, because when you do the ceramic coating, you coat every single surface on the car, including the glass. When you put ceramic coating on glass, you notice especially on sunroofs and mirrors, you won't get anywhere near the water spotting that you would typically get when you don't. Now, a couple of tips on preserving your ceramic coating. First, it's a very bad idea to use heavy detergent-based car washes like dishwashing detergent. So I use the Mystic Wash. It's safe for paint, safe for ceramic coating, and safe for waxes. It's a great product and goes a long way. Now, one of the other products that come with the ceramic kit is the Ceramic Boost. Now, the ceramic coating is going to last you about 2 to 3 years until you start to see the hydrophobic effects start to diminish. But you can help prolong that between washes by using the Ceramic Boost. You can use it as a quick detailer, or every second or third time maybe that you wash your car, wipe it down with a microfiber in the Ceramic Boost, and that'll just help preserve that hydrophobic effect and prevent water spots and help the ceramic coating last as long as possible. Now it's time to head over to the shop. I've got a Harley-Davidson gas tank sitting there waiting on me, and I'm going to show you how to do paint correction and also how to do a scratch repair.